Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. Broadcasting throughout the world and around the United Kingdom, we are bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. broadcasting live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter and on TikTok, folks. And on TikTok, the best experience will be found on YouTube, where you'll also be able to see our guest who's coming up at 7:30, none other than Ash, that Preston journalist. He's not been on the show for about 3 months, and we're looking really forward to speaking to him tonight. That'll be coming up at 7:30. Folks, the question tonight is, should we ignore Nicola Sturgeon? Okay, many of us want to do it. Many of us already do it. But is it wise policy? What is your thoughts on ignoring the Sturge? Okay, ignoring the Sturge. Do we ignore it or do we cater to it? Okay, that's going to be the theme this evening. Ignoring Sturgeon. What's your thoughts on that? Folks, please send in your comments. Please tell us where you're viewing from. We love to hear from where you're viewing worldwide and throughout the United Kingdom. So please send in those comments, and please, of course, like, share and subscribe. On TikTok, Throttle says, ignore Nicola Sturgeon. Shawnee says, jail her. West Unionist says, you guys have my support. Good to see. Good to see. Thanks for that. First in on YouTube tonight was Debbie. Good evening to you, Debbie, who says good evening to all watching. Hello to Frankie. Good to see you. Adam says it's come home, referring to the football victory at the weekend of the English women's football team. TC says good evening, all fellow unionists everywhere around the world. MN says, evening all, just wanted to start by saying ignore Nicola Sturgeon. Harry Brown says, hello unionists and AFFG on this lovely evening. An absolutely lovely evening also here in the great British city of Glasgow. And Marlene says, defo ignore. Liz Park says, yes, of course, ignore. And Kenny's calling in from East Kilbride. East Kilbride. And Marlene says, get her out. Well, we had our chance back in last year, so we do have to suffer her, I'm afraid, for the next 4 years. And Marlene is from Cleethorpes. Fantastic, great British town of Cleethorpes. And Frankie says, yes, ignore Nicola Sturgeon. Good evening, Stuart. Hope to hear your thoughts this evening. And Jan is quite specific. She says, get rid of Sturgeon. Hello to Catherine. Good evening, everyone. And congratulations to the English football team. Derek says he's calling in from the great British village of Armadale. And May says, don't ignore her regarding the separation referendum that she's always trying to hold. Hold her to account for the missing money and the mess this country is in. Well, that's certainly so, isn't it? Whether we like it or not, we do have to pay attention to her shenanigans and what she is up to. And we'll be talking about that more in a minute. Liz says she and her husband should be in jail. And Liz is watching from Wishaw. Marcus looking on from Biggar. But Kenny makes the point, ignore her like she's been ignoring the 55% of the population of the electorate of Scotland who voted. Isn't that so true? You know, all the time when Boris Johnson was in power, the sorts of nasty comments that Nicola Sturgeon would make about Boris Johnson, I don't have them to hand, but I'm sure somebody could assemble them, and really cutting and, you know, offensive comments. And nobody's going, oh, she shouldn't be saying that. Some people don't like that, but they just kind of put up with it. But, oh, you turn the tables on her and you say that she's an attention seeker. And the Scottish media and the Scottish politicians up here of the SNP and Green faction think it's the worst thing you could possibly ever say about her. Okay, so they can dish it out. But they can't take it back. An attention seeker, I mean to say, that's such a lowly diss, basically. Let's play the video of Liz Truss just talking about those things, okay? And because this is going to set the theme here.
I went to primary school in Paisley in Scotland, and I went to secondary school. Oh, and you did too. Maybe we were in the same class. Anyway, I feel like I'm a child of the Union, that I really believe we are a family and we're better together. And I think the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is ignore her. I think I'm sorry.
It's a bit difficult when she's First Minister, though. She's got a democratically elected position, just as you would.
I'm sorry, she's an attention seeker, Seb. That's what she is. And what we need to do is show the people of Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales what we are delivering for them. You know, Nicola Sturgeon can sort of carry on talking about an independence referendum. We had the referendum in 2014. It was agreed it was once in a generation. I didn't realise a generation happened within 10 years. That doesn't make any sense. So we've got to call her out on that, but at the same time really delivering for Scotland. So some of the policies I'm talking about, the investment zones, the free ports, we need to make sure they're delivered in Scotland too.
So that's an absolute no to another independence referendum whenever you are Prime Minister. There you are. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for those.
I am wearing Scottish colours as well.
Indeed. So that was the very interesting comments which were made. The very interesting comments which were made by Liz Truss, who the bookie's favourite seems to be for the next Prime Minister of our land. So she said ignore Nicola Sturgeon. She called her an attention seeker, and she said that, you know, it's been, the Nats have spoken about once in a generation, and a generation isn't, of course, 8 years. And that's a very good point that she makes. But one or two people have commented as a consequence of that, that one has to be awfully careful about that rhetoric. And Effie Deans wrote a very good article just the other day, actually, and 2 days ago, and she pointed this out, and I'll just tell you what she said. She said, Truss is merely telling the SNP that you will have to wait a generation when she says that, really, isn't she, when you think about it? And Effie Deans here, she points out, it's been almost 10 years since the last referendum. Well, what happens in another 10 years? After another 10, we would be getting close to a generation. 10 years in the lifetime of the UK is little more than an instant. So what Effie Deans here is suggesting quite correctly is that don't get caught up in that rhetoric, because, you know, a generation's going to come and then it's going to pass. And if we've tied ourselves into this sort of thing that we're not going with, that we don't want another referendum in this generation, well, what happens when a generation, so-called, passes? What happens when 20 years passes? And that's not going to be that long from now. So it's not very strong. It's not a very strong point to make. And the very next day, Stephen Daisley, who's another journalist, made essentially the same point. Perhaps he had been inspired by Effie Dean's article, I don't know. But he said, drop the once-in-a-generation chat. It's fun to remind the nationalists of their own words, but unionists are beginning to talk about this as though it were a constitutional provision. Once in a generation was the SNP's rhetoric, not Westminster's, and it is strategically foolhardy to adopt it as a standard. Eventually a generation will pass, and when it does, Westminster will rue giving legitimacy to this notion. The pro-UK position is this: there was a referendum in 2014, the result was clear, the matter is settled, there will be no further referendums. So, well said, well said. The point there basically is that we don't want the existence of the United Kingdom to be perpetually up for question and to be perpetually threatened by referendums. If we allow that, we are saying that the United Kingdom has no inherent integrity, that it's simply vulnerable to a referendum anytime, at any point. And that's not good enough. So once in a generation or not once in a generation, we don't want a referendum calling the existence of our own country into question. We don't want that at all. That's the bottom line. Now, if you're going to make that line, if you're going to make that very strong, authentic unionist line, you've got to have the knowledge and the confidence that you can stand by that, and you can stand up for that integrity, and you can make it a real thing. You can make the existence of the United Kingdom a real thing that's not going to be called into question. You know, if you're going to say that the United Kingdom is not up for question, you've got to be able to stand by it. You've got to be able to make the case for it, and you've got to be able to be putting forward policies which are strengthening that kingdom from day to day. Okay, so let's talk about some of those sorts of policies. Now, good to see Ibrox Park in the house, watching from the county of Down. May's hoping this is going to be Sturgeon's swan song. And Nelson says we have to work hard to stop Sturgeon from telling untruths about our wonderful United Kingdom. And thank you for the hard work that you do, Nelson, in sharing our material around. Please, folks, give us a like and a share and a subscribe. Alan liked those comments from Liz Truss. Catherine Vaney says, can you imagine her after a dram? Yes, I'm sure she's got a lot to say for herself, does Miss Elizabeth Truss. Which, if you're a politician, you have to have. And we need to get the press on our side. Stuart liked the point there that one was making. Avril says, it breaks my heart to see the devastation and mess Sturgeon has made of my homeland. Get rid of her so Scotland can get back to the fabulous, welcoming, friendly country it has always been famous for pre-SNP. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Let's get back to those days. Nelson says amen to that, Avril. Robert, good evening to you. Good evening to you, Robert. Now, points that you have to make if you are going to stand by the United Kingdom, and if you are going to say, look, this is one nation, indivisible, we shall not be divided, and we are going to keep it on the road, then these are the following points that a Prime Minister should be going straight into office and doing. And as soon as Liz Truss sets up a new cabinet, we will be bombarding her with our ideas, and we will be bombarding the cabinet members with our ideas. We'll be doing our little bit. But the first thing that she has to do, is to get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, the article by Effie Deans, which you'll find in the thread there, She says the Northern Ireland Protocol is an existential threat to the UK, which means a threat to its very existence. Not immediately, but long term. That's why Sinn Féin are so concerned to defend it. Brexit means that the UK will gradually diverge from the European Union, which means that separation for the SNP will be harder to achieve, because it would mean that Scotland would have to diverge greatly from the remainder of the UK in order to join the EU, which would make issues such as trade and the border between Scotland and the former UK much more problematical than if the divergence between the UK and the EU were just small. However, at the moment, because Northern Ireland remains in effect a part of the European Union for economic purposes, and because Northern Ireland has to follow EU regulations, then any divergence of the rest of the UK from the European Union increases the divergence between Northern Ireland and the other parts of the UK. And so at some point, what's going to happen is Northern Ireland is going to feel itself so closely aligned with the EU and so divergent from the UK that it depends economically on its relationship with the EU and not with the UK. And it's at that point that Northern Ireland, de facto, as Effie Deans says here, unifies with Ireland because they each follow the same EU regulations. So the next step becomes a matter of course. So the Northern Ireland Protocol is actually a very big threat to the Union of the United Kingdom, and the new Prime Minister who comes in with his or her new broom is going to have to sweep that protocol away. That's the first thing. That's the first threat to the long-term future of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol. It must be treated, as Effie Deans says here, as a threat to the existence of the UK and treated accordingly. And perhaps Truss understands this. So that's the first thing. The second easy win is, as we've always said, is to stop the British civil service in Scotland promoting separation. Now, if a law, and it will have to be a law, is passed to stop that, then that will really cut the wheels from under the Scottish National Party, because they depend upon the millions of pounds that are coming in order to pay the British civil service to write all these white papers, to do all this research, to put all this propaganda out there. Okay, so you stop that, and that's going again to derail the SNP. And we spoke about this. A law to stop the civil service pushing the India agenda. Now, Lord Foulkes has been doing a yeoman's work in the House of Lords promoting this idea, and it's time. It's time. Sometimes in the politics of societies, certain moments come along when it's time to do all these changes, and this will be one of them when we get a new Prime Minister who has to come straight in and do those two things: ditch the protocol, stop the British civil service promoting separation. The third thing is to change the devolution settlement. Okay, you need to change it from what it is at the moment to basically, at the moment, everything, the Holyrood, everything is permitted unless it's written down by Westminster. Okay, so Holyrood can do anything, can pass any law, any policy, unless it's written down as reserved. And even then, it's not very clear. That's why we have them going off to the Supreme Court for clarification. Utterly absurd. It should be crystal clear what Holyrood can and cannot do. So the so-called devolution settlement has to be changed so that only that which is written down clearly is permitted. We can't have this situation where we don't know if they can do it or not. All you need to do is check, is it written down as permitted? If it's written down as permitted, you can do it. If it's not written down as permitted, you can't do it. That's the settlement that should have been in place from the start. But it's not the one that we've got. And the fourth thing to do, and Effie Deans as well touches on this, is to integrate economically, okay? As she says, use British public spending to integrate each part of the UK so that it depends on every other part, so that separation is a stupid thing to do, because every part of the United Kingdom and all the businesses and so on are wound in together closely. As she says, make trade deals which it would be disadvantageous for firms in Northern Ireland or Scotland to ditch. Do everything you can to treat the UK as one country rather than four. And that's economic integration. That's what we need. And of course, we also need social and cultural integration. And again, in our magazine, Do More Together, we've spoken about over 102 different ideas for social and cultural integration, and you can get that from our shop. Let's put up the shop link there so that you'll be able to get it. Now folks, we've got a guest coming in around 10 minutes, who is the great Ash, that Preston journalist. There you go. Do More Together at our shop. And we always punt our stuff, folks, because that's what keeps us on the road. That's what keeps us going. Hey Emma, what's up? Christopher says the devolution settlement needs to be tightened up. Indeed. Adam wonders how Nicola will respond to Lizzie's comments. Well, she'd made some sort of silly tweet there. We can get rid of that shop thing. She made some silly tweet, but I can't. It wasn't anything special that I can remember. Paul gives a reasoned thought here. He goes, "It's a dilemma. Perhaps we should not make personal comments about Sturgeon, as the SNP will seize on them to further division. However, we still have to be firm and truthful also." That's absolutely certain. Hello to Richard. Marcus says he would like to see devolution abolished in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. That's what he wants to see in his lifetime. Derek says that he wants to see the House of Lords abolished and replaced by a House of Nations. Well, we've thought about that one, Derek, but our fear would be it would simply just, a House dominated. If it, say the Scottish contingent would be made up probably in the same proportion as the Scottish MPs in the House of Commons. And so the danger there is that it would really just be almost like duplicating the House of Commons. But it needs a bit of thought, that one, definitely. But there's certainly things that could be improved with the House of Lords. Or at least the second chamber, put it that way. Stephen says it's pointless to try to get the SNP to stick to their devolved remit. She just ignores anything that she doesn't like. That's absolutely correct. Emma says she's had a rough few days, but she'll survive, as I always do. Good. Glad to hear it, Emma. And ignore her tweet, says Stuart. Yes, that's essentially what we did with Nicola Sturgeon. Emma wants to abolish Holyrood as well. It's a considerably popular opinion among people. Now, in 5 minutes, we've got our guest coming up. Just before our guest, though, we'll have our This Day in British History, and we'll also have our competition. Now, this is the prize. It's this little badge, which it's got a Union Jack in the middle, and then it's got the 4 flags of Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland around the side, topped by a crown. And we'll ask you a question about that after On This Day in British history because it's important. If we want to know where we're going, we have to know where we are, and we don't know where we are unless we know where we have been. And so we always have a this day in British history because British history matters. Now, on this day in British history, on the 3rd of August in 1798, the 3-day Battle of the Nile was concluded, and this was a naval battle. The British against the French, and a decisive victory for Admiral Nelson on the Mediterranean Sea just off of Egypt. And Napoleon was aiming to invade Egypt as the first step in a campaign against British India. And as the Brits got to hear about it, Nelson pursued the French fleet across the Mediterranean and found them anchored in Aboukir Bay. And sometimes it's called the Battle of Aboukir, or usually the Battle of the Nile. And so he ordered an immediate attack, and the battle lasted for 3 days. And on the first day there was this massive explosion, and we've got a painting there. It was an explosion of the French flagship L'Orient, destroyed after a fire started by paints which had been left on the deck. And that painting is called the destruction of L'Orient on the 1st of August 1798. And that's a pretty dramatic photograph. Painting. I guess that's L'Orient blowing up in the background, and some soldiers there clinging on to a cannon that looks like it's going to be flying off the deck at any moment. So the Nelson destroyed the French Mediterranean fleet, and that gave control of the Mediterranean to the British, and the ability of the British to block French ports and trap the French army in North Africa, where they were eventually defeated at the Battle of Alexandria on the 21st of March. Okay. 21st of March 1801. Now that battle is commemorated on the Nelson Monument in Glasgow Green, where it says Aboukir. It's also commemorated in West Nile Street in Glasgow. West Nile Street, which is one of the main thoroughfares in Glasgow. That's named after the Battle of the Nile. And there's also an Aboukir Street in Govan, which remembers that battle as well. So it's remembered quite a bit. And we've also got 2 Nelson Streets in Glasgow, and we've also got a Nelson pub in Glasgow, which I've been in. So these things are remembered, as we say in Glasgow. And talking about Nelson, discovered an interesting thing today. I finally got last March, the Glasgow City Council, they released this thing called the Glasgow Slavery and Atlantic Commerce Audit of Historic Connections and Modern Legacies, which has actually helped me greatly in identifying some of the great British elements of Glasgow, which the particular person who wrote this isn't necessarily a fan of, although I'm a fan of basically everything here. However, he gets something completely wrong. He's having a go at Nelson because of the Nelson Streets, and because of... See, he doesn't even know that... I don't know if he knows that West Nile Street is commemorated. No, he doesn't seem to. Anyway, he talks about Nelson having written a letter where he was supportive of slavery. Well, this fellow who put this together did it in March 2022. However, if he'd been paying attention, he would have noticed that way back in October 2020, that letter was revealed as a fake. That Nelson never wrote a letter in defence of slavery. It was an absolute fake, as this article points out. And this article appeared in the Mail on the 13th of October 2020. And we at A Force for Good actually interviewed the vice chairman, I believe, of the Nelson Society for our Yo Britannia Christmas crowdfunder for half an hour on this very subject. And we'll put the YouTube podcast link. We'll put the podcast link up in the thread there, where you can hear the truth of the matter, that Nelson never wrote a letter supporting slavery, and in fact it was a fake. But that's not known to the person who's written the official audit for Glasgow City Council from an anti-Nelson point of view. Well, you'd think he would have at least got his facts right on that, since it's totally public knowledge. You don't even have to go into a library to find that out. Anyway, we've got our guest coming up in 1 minute, and my question to you is, on this day, the 3rd of August 1798, and please send your answer into contact@aforceforgood.uk. And if you've never tried it before, you're in with a good chance of winning this little badge. On this day, Nelson won a famous battle against the French in the Mediterranean. What was the battle called? And it's known by two names, but just give us one of them, and you're in with a very good chance of winning this wee badge. A 3-day battle, ships blasting away at each other across the sunny Mediterranean Sea. Now, folks, please welcome our guest this evening, Ash, who is also known as That Preston Journalist.
Evening, Alistair. You well?
I'm very well, Ash, and you're coming through loud and clear. Great to see you, and thank you very much. You're in a different studio today.
To be honest with you, if you want the truth, I've been rushing around after work, and I've just had to literally jump on, that's all. So that's all
right.
It is.
Right. Well, thank you.
Same room, just different background.
All right. Well, thanks very much for being a guest. We haven't had you on for about 3 months or thereabouts, and always happy to have you on. I know that you've always got a lot to say. In fact, I mean, you're knocking out videos like once a day, basically. Was that basically your schedule? Because how is it? I mean, how do you do that? Like, do you say, right, between 7 and 8, I'm going to do a video, or do you just do it when it comes to you?
So I do 4 videos a day covering different political topics, and then basically some are pre-recorded, so they might be a day old, and then they'll go out the next day to try and keep ahead. Because if I tried to do it 4 a day and work at the same time, I wouldn't be able to do it. So it's got to be done sort of like the night before, if you will. But then if something just comes to me, like you said, I'll just literally record it on my phone and put it out there.
Right. What, using, do you do it live, or?
No, I'll just pre-record it on my phone, then just upload it to YouTube from my phone.
Right, good. Well, I mean, I noticed that you get hundreds and hundreds of views within half an hour. And, I mean, you put out one just like, you'll get 2,000 views within an hour, and you'll get like 300 or 400 likes. I mean, that's good going. There's no question about that. It's very good going.
No, it is good.
So well done for everything that you do. Have you made one about Liz Truss and her statement about Nicola Sturgeon about being an attention seeker?
Yeah, it went out yesterday, I think it was, and I made the video. I actually think it's a good thing that Liz Truss is saying these things. It's nice to see Westminster finally showing a bit of backbone and paying a bit of attention to actually what's going on north of the border. I mean, you know better than most the state of what the SNP are turning Scotland into at the moment. And let's just hope that these two candidates, whichever one wins it, I suspect it's Liz Truss that's going to win it, but whichever one wins it, they actually stick by their promises. And Rishi said he'll bypass Holyrood altogether for a lot of funding, which would be a very good thing, because obviously the money would go straight to the councils who know what their local areas need. Whereas Liz Truss has basically said, well, I'll just ignore these cries for a referendum and get on with the day job, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much that they could actually do, but it's going to require them to take a whole new view of things. I think Stephen Daisley, he made the point here, and I don't know if I've got it straight to hand, but he made the point that once they get into these positions of power, the day-to-day carry-ons in Westminster tends to just take up all their time, and they don't have they're just running back and forward on these little things. It's as if they don't really have a grand project. He didn't make this point. I'm making this particular point.
Yeah.
That these people need, whether it's Truss or Sunak, they need a grand project that will characterise their premiership, and it should be, from our particular perspective, making the United Kingdom great again, which means essentially building the integrity of the United Kingdom itself, because, you know, it's maybe not fully understood in some parts of Whitehall, but Britain is the union of Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales, and that has to be brought together. If you don't bring that together, if you don't strengthen that, then you don't actually have a Britain, which means you don't have a British Parliament. So there's that grand project. Now is the time for that, I think.
Well, you know, this might sound a bit harsh, but if you can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. It's not like anyone's forcing them to apply for this job, and I'm not saying it's an easy job, but they're supposed to be leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. And if you're not going to focus on the union, then you're probably in the wrong job, aren't you? And on top of that, they've got a cabinet. I mean, the government payroll now is ridiculous. It's something like 100 people that are on the government payroll. If you can't pass them projects that you want doing and tell them to do it, then what are they there for? You might as well not have a cabinet and save us all a load of money on the taxpayer money. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely remarkable when you see it's minister for this, minister for that. You know, what is it that they're actually doing, and how is that contributing to things? I mean, maybe you do need people, and maybe you do need departments for those sorts of things, but do they need to be ministers of state? Do they need to get a huge amount more in their payroll? Whatever. It's there are things about the Westminster structure that, even as a unionist, just because we're unionists doesn't mean that we agree with the way that Whitehall and the civil service and British government is necessarily run. I mean, there's lots of improvements that can be made.
Yeah.
Democratic improvements as well, not to say economic savings, but there's a lot that can be done, because there's this horrible feeling that it's, you know, once they get in there, they just become part of a system that doesn't seem to have our interests at heart at all. And I don't know, maybe it's just the way that these sorts of big organisations end up working. These big companies, it's just like when the government's a kind of company of a sort, you know. They just, I don't know if I don't know what your thoughts are on that and the reform in general.
Look at the state. I mean, every single year we seem to get new ministerial positions that never existed in the past. You've got, I mean, what's that Lorna Slater of the Scottish Greens? What's her title? Something like Green Buildings Minister or something. I mean, what is that?
Minister for the Circular Economy, I'll have you know.
I mean, what is that? Sounds like an employment minister to me. What's the difference?
Yeah, I looked into it. I think it's got something to do with like recycling. You know how that's theoretically recycling. You know, it goes in one end and comes out the other, sort of thing. A bit like her comments tend to do, I have to say. But yeah, something like that. I mean, and they're not. I saw you put out a wee video about Ross Greer. What was that one about?
Oh yeah, the Green Greer. Yeah, he's It turns out that obviously he's supposed to be about the environment and all this kind of stuff, and then someone took a picture outside his constituency office, which I think is in East Dunbartonshire. And it's if you look at the picture, it's got plastic on the floor outside it, cardboard, glass, you name it, everything, just piled up out, basically fly tipping all over a public walkway.
We've got that picture actually. We'll put it up in the we'll put it up in a second when we find it. But that's right. I couldn't believe that. That's outside Ross Greer's actual office as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Doesn't he have any sort of concept of There it is. There, yeah. We'll just get rid of that red banner so you can see it properly.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But there you go. What a mess.
That's it. You can see insulation, plastic, cardboard, glass.
Yeah.
Everything that should go in a recycling bin just on the street.
I know. And I don't know if he put it there himself. He probably did, but you'd think he could at least like shift it to the corner or something like that, so it wasn't such a ridiculously bad optic for him. But there you go.
Of course, yeah. You know, just talking about minister positions then, I've literally just found one now. I was scanning through, and that's Alok Sharma. He's literally a minister for COP26 that has already passed and was a complete and utter failure anyway. The guy that started crying live on telly because he was scared the planet was going to blow up or something. I'm like... Did he? Yeah, he started crying live on TV, yeah. Unbelievable these people are, honestly.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible, considering that the whole COP26 thing was just, in my particular view anyway, was just... The whole thing's like a sham. It's just like another fear-mongering thing to get people scared of, you know. And the system's doing this all the time. Just going back to COP26, they had this big march, of course, and myself and a couple of colleagues videoed it, and we counted it. And it was easy to count in live time because it wasn't packed in. You know, it was really just a matter of going at that and making a note, 100, and there was 13,000 exactly, give or take 1 or 2% margin of error. But oh no, the media had already decided there was going to be 100,000 on it. And they were saying there's going to be 100,000 people on this march. And then the next day it was 100,000 people came on the march. However, our organisation filmed it and counted it. And the video is up there for anybody who wants to count it on our website, aforceforgood.uk. And so... That was another big hoax, like, because when they say there's 100,000 people in Glasgow marching for the climate, you know, normal people would think, well, that's an awful lot of people who seem to be really concerned about that. But when they actually find out, no, it wasn't 100,000, it was 13,000, and of those 13,000, virtually all of them were incomers. Like, they weren't Glasgow people. There would be a few Glasgow students, a few hundred Glasgow students, and assorted people like that, but beyond that it was all just people had come in from worldwide over for that into Glasgow,
on private jets, of course, as well.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Joe Biden came in with something like a 50 car what do you call them, cavalier, is it, when they're all going together down the road, like a convoy, if you will. And these people use more carbon in a day than me and you would use probably in a lifetime.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They can't be that bothered.
Absolutely, that's right, absolutely. So, I mean, do you have? I've noticed you've been making one or two videos. Would I be right to say about the Great Reset, or maybe not making videos about it, but having, you know, beginning to comment on things like that? Is that the food that you're going to go down in? Mm-hmm.
It's definitely all about control. Everything that's going on at the moment is about control. Every aspect of our lives at the moment, these people cannot wait to stick their big noses in and try and stop us doing what we do, trying to take our freedoms away bit by bit. And it all seems to be done by stealth, doesn't it? It always starts with, for example, children. It will start with primary school children and people that are easily impressed upon. And then they try and pass it on to the adults. But obviously they won't target us because we've got our own free minds. But there's so many things going on at the moment. Look at these farmers in Holland. They're being told they have to give up 30% of their farmland to stop some sort of nitrogen build-up. But who gets that 30% land? The government are literally confiscating it off them. People that have farmed this land for years, centuries even, and they're having the land taken away from them to try and stop some sort of pesticide build-up in the atmosphere. Yes. It's all under the guise of climate, like they're trying to save us. But in actual fact, it's taking away your rights bit by bit, week by week.
Yes, I agree with that, and it's something that the two Conservative candidates for Prime Minister haven't addressed, and I can't really imagine them addressing it, unfortunately. But it is a big elephant in the room that they should be talking about, because it involves, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, these big major globalist organizations who are enforcing control just as badly as, in fact, almost more so than the EU. For example, the EU was making up laws for Britain, but in a sense, the WHO and WEF are setting various agendas behind the scenes for Britain as well. I mean, I always remember, like, we came out of the EU technically on the 31st of January 2020, and within 8 weeks, we were locked down in our homes. Okay, so we're thinking this is going to be great freedom for Britain from the EU. Within 8 weeks, we're actually imprisoned in our own houses. Right, so much for the freedom that we were expecting we were going to get. And so it's almost like if you were a conspiratorial, which I'm not, but if you were, you would say, oh, they're so angry that Britain left the EU, we're going to punish them now by enforcing WHO and WEF diktats on them so they all stay at home. and on pain of punishment as well. And we're not really out of that yet, because no politician has redeemed us from that. No politician has chucked that in the bin. They've all just let it lie there. They've
look
not
at the consequences.
Condemned it.
I don't want to get you in trouble with YouTube, but look at the consequences. Look at the debt this country's in now. Look at the state of our economy. Look at the cost of living rising all the time. People that literally cannot afford to eat 3 meals a day. This is all as a result of basically half the world at least destroying their own economies quite willingly, borrowing huge sums of money they can't afford. Rishi wants to keep taxes up because he thinks he can start paying the debt back now. At least Liz Truss is going to keep taxes down a bit and pay the debt off whenever we can, because let's face it, we can't afford to pay it off because, as I just said, people are struggling to heat their homes. And when it comes to winter, some people are going to be in for a very, very tough winter indeed, and the government is in no small part to blame for all this. In fact, all 4 nations, the devolved administrations as well, are all to blame.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible. I live on my own, and my utilities bill, which is marked Scottish Gas, was £44 a month. Now, I don't use much electricity or gas, to be frank with you. Okay, I use electricity for the computers, and I use gas like once a day when I'm cooking my evening meal. But I hardly use the heating ever, apart from a couple of months in the winter. And it's still 44 quid. It's probably too high. I'm on some kind of direct debit. I got it in the other day. It's gone from £44 to £88. It's doubled. Unbelievable, doubled. Now, most people actually do live day to day, week to week, month to month pay packet, and to double your utilities bill is criminal.
Yeah.
And it's, who do I blame? I blame Boris, I blame Nicola, Sturgeon, and I blame the Green Goblins. All of these people together, and COP26, all of these people said that the cheapest form of fuel, which is so-called fossil fuels, was bad, and that they're not going to promote that or seek new fossil fuels or dig them out the ground or frack or do anything that would actually keep us warm and keep us fed and so on. We're going to go for them straight away. We're going to go for the highest price, most awkward energy we can possibly find.
Yeah,
and
that doesn't work anyway.
No, it's absolute madness, and dangerous as well, and cruel to the people of the country. You should be aiming for what's called energy independence. Every country should aim for it. Just go ahead, yeah.
That fracking site, the only one in the UK, is literally about 5 or 6 miles up the road from me, and there was no earthquakes. There was one small tremor, I believe. That was it. Nothing happened, and they were successfully fracking for gas. Some people find it controversial for some reason, but they won't find it controversial when the bills quadruple in October again. But we should be opening coal mines now. We should be fracking now. We should be getting as much energy as we can out of the ground and storing it, because, my God, we're going to need it. And families in this country are going to need it. And you look at people like Centrica, for example, that own British Gas. You look at, who was the other one? Shell have just announced record profits. and they're all paying huge dividends out to their shareholders. But if they can afford to make these profits, why aren't they lowering the prices a bit?
Well, that is a good question. And, I mean, do you have an answer to that? I mean...
It's greed, isn't it? It's got to be greed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can think of anyway. I can't think of any other reason.
Yeah.
Maybe as a result of the windfall tax, which I always thought was a bad idea anyway. Maybe now they don't want to put the prices down.
Nelson has a comment for them.
It is money grabbing, it is, and unfortunately there's not a lot we could do. They'll say it's a global price, which I suppose it is, but these people are making such huge profits, and as I said, we're being expected, or they want us to put £15,000 heat pumps in our homes that nobody can afford.
Oh, don't get me started on that as well. That's madness, and that could be coming. And I mean, there's a comment there. Sandra says the two Greens are only ministers for nothing to make sure Sturgeon never loses a vote in Holyrood. It's
well, that's
scandalous.
right, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why they've got such meaningless job titles, isn't it?
Yes. That's right. And so, if one of talking about making Britain great again, if either Truss or Sunak was to come forward and do something about the energy crisis in the United Kingdom and have a plan for energy independence, which would require going back to fossil fuels, then they would have huge support.
Yeah.
But have their minds become so warped? While they might be good on other things, in some people's opinion, have their minds become so warped against cheap energy that they would never think about that? Because, whoever is going to be the Prime Minister is going to be facing some big challenges. Yeah. And so I hope, and we're all going to have to hope and pray for them, because they're only human beings at the end of the day. But I mean, it's really going to be difficult for them going forward. If energy bills are doubling, then that's unsustainable for a great number of people.
Of course it is. I mean, to be fair to them, they've both said they would start fracking, but only if that local community where the well is placed agree to it, which is fair enough, I suppose. But there has to come a point as well where we have to start opening coal mines again or something. And we're actually shutting down places in this country that provide nuclear energy, and then planning to build something like, I think it's one a year for the next 10 years or something like that. But then there's lots of people saying we don't want nuclear energy on our doorsteps and stuff. And the fact is, we're going to have to keep using these fossil fuels at least until there's enough nuclear power plants to power this country. In my opinion, that is the way. Nuclear is the way forward, because it's clean, it's efficient, and it's pretty cost effective once it's up and running, although it costs a fortune to build the actual plants themselves. But that's the way we're going to have to go, I think, if they want rid of fossil fuels altogether.
Yeah. There's at least having an idea like that, and at least presenting it with us and saying this is how it's all going to work out. That would be a start. But they don't even have that on the agenda. It's
I don't think they expect to be in a job long enough for a long-term plan, do they? So they just this is the problem with our system, isn't it?
That's another good point about our system, is it's one in the door, one out the door, and then they're forgotten about forevermore.
And even if you do vote for somebody, it seems that politicians, or MPs, shall I say, from a certain party, can just take it upon themselves to oust that person anyway. Obviously talking about Boris now, for all his faults, he won an 80-seat majority and got a clear mandate from the country. Yet it seems that MPs don't care about people's votes now. So they can just oust them whenever they feel like it anyway. So it makes you wonder what the point in voting is.
Oh, gosh. Well, don't go there. Don't go there. Mark Donald says, you two should start your own party. Well, that's another difficulty, isn't it? I suppose we certainly could put our brains together and come up with some good policies. And that's what basically we're doing as it is, isn't it? I mean, you're coming out with your ideas. You're putting them out there on your YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/that Preston Journalist.
Again, with the voting system, you haven't got a chance really, have you? It takes someone very special to actually manage to do something like that, and the last person to do it probably the only person to do it was Nigel Farage, wasn't it? Nobody else has managed it.
Yeah. Well, as long as we have politicians who pick up on the good ideas, that's, people say, what can we individuals do? Well, you can try to feed your ideas to the politicians and hope that they are in a position to do something about it. And you can also wish them the best, and try to strengthen their arm as much as possible. So you're on youtube.com, that Preston Journalist. You're also on Twitter at AKWriting88.
Yeah.
And it's coming to the top of the hour shortly, so we'll say thank you very much for coming on this evening, Ash. 20 minutes passes very quickly. Folks, please do check out Ash's stuff. Follow him on Twitter and follow him on YouTube. And
I can just say one more thing before I go.
Please do.
We spent a lot of time slagging politicians off there. I would just say to everyone watching, they're not all bad. I've met lots of MPs, and they're not all bad at all. There are some good ones.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just it's sort of a hobby to slag them off, isn't it, when things are going badly? So that's what they're paid for.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And everybody's in it for the best, even though in our personal opinions they may be mistaken. They themselves are in it because they believe they're doing the right thing, you know. Anyway, on that philosophical note, we'll say goodbye, Ash. More power to your elbow, and keeping the British end up. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, everyone. See you later.
Goodbye. Good old Ash, that Preston Journalist, always a refreshing voice on the scene. Good stuff. Okay, we have a winner of our competition, and it was for this little badge here. And I said to you that on this day, which was the 3rd of August in 1789, the Nelson beat Napoleon at what battle? And the answer was the Battle of the Nile, or sometimes called the Battle of Aboukir. And David Shannon is the winner. Well done, David. Congratulations to you. This badge will be winging its way to you. Now, if you just drop us your address, please, using that same email, and we'll send this to you tomorrow. Good stuff. And we'll also send you a complimentary copy of our magazine Happy and Glorious, which folks can get from the shop. Now, talking about our website shop and talking about our website, we've got a couple of new articles up there. One of them is called British History Index, and what we've done on this article is we've listed all the historical articles that we've written, and we've put them in chronological order from early history, going through the Bruce period, going through the Jacobean Union, which is to say the Union of the Crowns, going through the British Civil War in the 1600s, then going to the Union of Parliaments in 1707, and then going into the 19th century and all the articles that we've written about the things that happened in the Age of Achievement, the Pax Britannica 19th century. So they're all either up or about to be linked to, so you'll be able to just have one page where you can get all the articles. So that's a really good resource, which in time will just be absolutely amazing. We've also got another article which we put up called Sovereignty, People and Parliament Explained. And what that's about is, remember last week when we had our Busting Indie Myths, we were talking about the concept of sovereignty. So what we've done is we've simply just written that out, and that's as an article now, which you can find up on our website, which is aforceforgood.uk. aforceforgood.uk. Go there. It's such a fantastic British resource. Now, folks, thank you to everybody on TikTok who were also commenting about stuff, and thank you to everybody who commented here. And just looking at the comments, Stuart says thanks to Ash. Nelson says Ash is a pleasure to listen to. Catherine says you're brilliant, Ashley, well done. Kenny says cheers, Ash. And Debbie says well done, David Shannon, for winning the badge, as does Nelson. Good stuff. Okay, folks. Thank you very much for watching. Now, we're going to be back next week, so in the meantime, please do like, share and subscribe, because we're trying to get our YouTube followers up there, but YouTube seems to have it in for us, it seems. Anyway, we're not going to stop putting out the message, but if you can share or subscribe on YouTube, please do so. Click the red button, then click the bell for notifications. Ladies and gentlemen, it's come to the end of the program. It just remains for me to say thank you for watching. God bless the United Kingdom, and God save the Queen. See you next week.